All right. So last little video, we kind of introduced this little bit, the idea of the death penalty. And so just for illustrative purposes, right? We're going to illustrate an old classic game, but something that still happens, right? And that is playing hangman, right? So as you guys may or may not know, right? Obviously, when we think about death penalty, it has become a fairly contentious issue when it didn't maybe used to be. Certainly different before. I guess I zoomed out. I guess this is fine. Whatever. So when we think about the death penalty, right? It used to be super popular, super more aggressive, and there were a lot of reasons why people wanted it, right? One is this retribution aspect, right? Where it definitely felt good to kill someone who killed someone else, right? And that was often one of the more, agreements that came related to it, right? Is that there is this sense of balance, right? When we have someone who is executed for a crime that they committed, it feels good, right? Interestingly enough, this is more of an aside than anything, is that in Texas, there are a lot more people who, at least when I was teaching at UT Dallas, when I was in grad school, there would be students who'd be like, no, I'm against the death penalty because it's inhumane. It's whatever, right? I don't like it, right? In California, interesting though, there are people who would say, oh, the death penalty is too light of a punishment. They should get life in prison because that's much more harsh. And I always found it interesting that, two different states with different attitudes and opinions of the death penalty historically achieved the same conclusion, at least with the students that I interviewed, but through different paths, right? They both got there, but in very different ways. But having said that, Texas is the state that's very much like retribution, right? So, that falls into our, philosophy of punishment then, is that, it feels good to harm people who harm society in some way. At the same time, right, it was also seen as, a deterrent effect, right? That if we obviously were deterring a single person from committing crime again because they're going to die. So, obviously not going to do that, but it also communicates that the state or the government is willing to kill people if they believe it's happened, right? So that part is seen as good, right? If we look into another pro, or at least a pro death penalty thing, other than its retribution, it feels good, it deters people. It's believed to be fair because of that, right? Some people have argued that it's a simple solution. It's quick and it leaves the job done kind of deal, right? And why would we want to keep it happen? So a lot of the discussion and feedback around keeping the death penalty, is really evolved around it feels pretty damn good, right? It's people who really want to keep guns, right? It's have you ever shot a gun? It feels pretty damn good. Interestingly enough, I remember being on an airplane once. And this guy's from Indiana. He's flying back from Indiana, from California, and he was telling us that I was out here for some sort of conference or something. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm out here in California, but let me tell you something. You need to come out to Indiana, and we can show you what you're missing out in California. We can shoot some guns, right?" So I was like, "Oh shit! I should move away from California so I can move to Indiana, and then I could shoot all the time." Much better than all the other reasons to live in California. So these are kind of more the pros or arguments against it, right? Is that, it's more of a feelings-based argument rather than it. But at the same time, right, let's think about, some cons, which I'm picking in green, which is weird that I should have done green for the pros, but we have cons, right? So the reality is that regardless of your feelings about it, right, perhaps it is, properly applied in some circumstances, perhaps it's not properly applied in other areas, right? That's something that's open to debate, I guess it's situational. So if we think about a con though, right, one is that, I guess it depends on your viewpoint, right? It takes years for this to resolve, and people have to go through a lot of different appeals processes before they're able to finally say once and for all that their crime is taken care of, right, or that they are free from anything like that, right? So it is a very time-consuming process. Interestingly enough, right, you would think it'd be fairly easy to kill someone, and it is, right? You think about in modern times, right, the drug of choice, I forget what the name of it is, but, you can do that, you can kill someone, it's fairly cheap. But when you factor in the cost of housing someone, the cost of the actual prosecution, especially since, like, if you're going for the death penalty, like, states and counties spend a huge amount of money trying to prosecute these cases. The cost is substantially more than keeping someone in prison for life, right? So it's, now could you remove barriers? Could you expedite the issue? Perhaps. But at the same time, right, like it is something that to be concerned about, right, is that the cost in and of itself is kind of an uh-oh, right? At the same time, right, when we think about the cost that comes into place, right, we also think about, errors, right? It is known that there are errors related with the death penalty, that some innocent people end up dying because they were targeted for that, right? And some would make the argument that a few broken eggs is okay. Others would say when it comes to human life, right, it becomes a bit of an issue, right? So maybe we should or should not kill people based off of the potential for mistakes. Another aspect then to think about, right, is, fairness and equity, even though this is seen as, riding a scale of, a wrong was committed, so then we feel better about it. If this is truly equitable or fair, in this case, then, there does seem to be, the death penalty seems to be disproportionately used against people of who are younger in age and also of an ethnic background. So in that sense, and if it's disproportionately used against these people, then it is neither fair or equitable in those circumstances. So it creates a problem then, right? Is that if this is supposed to be a fair, equal punishment, that's supposed to be, true and able to fair, equitable treatment that is, justly used. If it's not being used justly, then why use it at all, right? Is one circumstance. There are, of course, all other arguments about, it's being a cruel and unusual punishment. And, it certainly was true when you consider the ways that we used to kill people, right? We used to focus on electrocution. We used to use a gas chamber. That was kind of thrown out of favor because, it turns out seems a lot like, Nazi tools and stuff like that. We used to hang people or shoot them and stuff like that. I think in some states, like you can opt into hanging or shooting, or that some people have. Interestingly enough, I think in some states that there is a provision like where people want to opt into their punishment. So even though they outlaw like injections by lethal injection, but because you were convicted by shooting, like condemned to death by shooting, you still have to get shooting, even though like it's not illegal. It's some like weird thing like that. I can't remember it, right? Point being, right, is that there are some perceived cons with the process, right? And so the other part then is, does this actually deter people? One of the biggest things that people have with the death penalty, right, is that this deters crime. It's like really great. We should keep it because of that. At the same time, right, how many people is it actually deterring, right? Or is there, a possibility that it amplifies behavior because someone who feels like they're kind of screwed no matter what decides to kill people, like say in a robbery, rather than just like, going with it, right? That could be a problem, right? It depends on your perception of it. So I think it leads to a lot of questions about, is this actually achieving what we want? I guess one of the other issues that we should consider, right, is that if it feels good, does that mean we should do it? Or should we use more of our head, right? Because even though it might feel wonderful to kill someone, right, and really have them answer for their crimes and so on, right, does this actually mean that we should go with it, right? Does it make sense in the balance? I noticed a little bit in the early packback stuff that this was a hot topic, so I'm curious to see what you guys have to say. But for now,